Joining me from Dallas to discuss the influx of immigrant children to the U.S. is Ann Badmus. She is an attorney with more than 20 years of experience in immigration matters. Ann, welcome to the program. 50,000 children at the border. President Obama calls this a humanitarian crisis. How serious is the problem?
Well, it is quite serious. The border, of course, or the patrol at the border has to deal with all the children who are coming in. And there are specific requirements that are by law that the Border Patrol and the government has to follow. So it is, my understanding, taxing the system somewhat.
When we look at the problems that the children are fleeing, violence in their countries, poverty, and things like that, what kind of protection do these children have under international, or for that matter, domestic law here in the United States? I mean, should they be considered refugees or asylum seekers?
Well, currently, the way the law stands, to be a refugee or an asylum seeker, you really have to have the reason for your patriation to the United States would have to be related to political, religious, or some discrimination on the part of the government that you're fleeing from. And in most cases, from what I understand, although there is poverty and violence, not necessarily perpetrated by the government, in that case, they may not qualify for an asylum or refugee claim.
What do you make of President Obama's latest initiative to process and ultimately deport these children, to speed up the process? More lawyers in Texas, more judges in Texas, more asylum officers. Basically, he wants to turn them around as soon as possible.
Well, I think it's probably something, otherwise, if that's not done the way the system is currently, you would expect that they would be prolonged. The system would, as it is, would be backlogged quite a bit for those people who are already in the system. And in many cases, it would delay the processing of these kids if he doesn't speed things up, doesn't increase the staffing that's necessary to process everyone through the system.
Right, I have a question here. I know you're a lawyer, you deal with these things on a legal basis. I want you to listen to what Hillary Clinton said about this particular issue at a recent town hall meeting. Let's listen.
Well, they should be sent back as soon as it can be determined who responsible adults and their families are, because there are concerns about whether all of them can be sent back, but I think all of them who can be should be reunited with their families. And just as Vice President Biden is arguing today in Central America, we've got to do more. I started this when I was secretary, to deal with the violence in this region, to deal with border security. But we have to send a clear message. Just because your child gets across the border, that doesn't mean the child gets to stay.
And I'm just wondering, Anne, as we listen there to Hillary Clinton, to what extent has the whole problem become even more complicated because it's become a political issue now?
Well, certainly, when politics is involved, you can expect it to be complicated. And that's sort of where, as immigration attorneys, we really believe that this is one of the, I guess, factors or one of the situations that really means that we have to come together to decide how we're going to reform immigration. It's very necessary. And this is just a symptom of that.
Right. You mentioned at the outset of the interview that the children have to go through some kind of legal process here. What is that process?
Well, the way the law is written is basically that the children, of course, the Department of Homeland Security, as well as the Department of Health and Human Services, has to, first of all, ensure that the kids are safe and healthy. And so they have to go through screening in that sense and be sure that they're placed in safe environment. In many cases, that will be detention centers that have been set up by the government. And then they will also be processed to determine if they do actually have any claims which would allow them to remain in the United States. That being asylum or refugee, as you mentioned earlier, or if they have been victims of trafficking. And in that case, the government, of course, would have to entertain their claims, and they would have to prove them through the court system with assistance of lawyers if need be.
What about children who have relatives in the United States? In many instances, could be their parents. Are they allowed to reunite with their families in the United States and stay here?
Well, not necessarily stay indefinitely. Some of them may be released to people or to their relatives who are in the United States. If their relatives are here legally, they can be released to them. The relatives are usually screened as well to be sure that there are no issues in terms of possibility of just basically child abuse, that sort of thing. So they're going to be screened as well for criminal issues to be sure that they're not releasing kids to a harmful environment. but there may be some kids who do qualify to be released.
Okay, and we're going to have to leave it there. And Badmus, thanks for joining us.